All right, welcome everyone to the Monday, March 11th, 2024 Tumwater City Council work session. We're having this on a Monday because we have presidential primary on Tuesday. So we always move our council meeting to a Monday when we have primaries and general elections. All right, so first item is roll call, and I know that Councilmember Dahlhoff and Councilmember Swarthout are excused this evening, and I believe that Councilmember Jefferson will be joining us, but I do not see her at this moment. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with the Davis Meeker Oak presentation, and Mike Metlock will be presenting.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. Okay. So the Davis Meeker Oak. I'm going to move things around here so I can see a little bit better. We're all familiar with the Davis Meeker Oak. There's a picture of it there, looking kind of southwest. It's a specimen tree. It's an Oregon white oak. It's the only native oak to Washington State. This particular specimen is estimated to be about 400 years old. And it's a very significant tree for Tumwater for some of the reasons that are stated here. Early settlers use a tree as a landmark. It's on the northern branch of the Oregon Trail. And as such, it was placed on the Tumwater Historic Register of Historic Places on November 16th of 95. And the Thurston County Commissioners installed a marker next to the tree on Arbor Day in 1999, naming it the Davis Meeker Oak. So this is why we're here tonight. There's been a lot of public comment that we received recently about this tree. People are understandably concerned about the health of the tree and its prospects. This is a picture of a branch that fell in June of last summer. And this branch is about an 18-inch diameter branch. It's this, you can see this here. This is where the branch came off one of the main stems of the tree. This is about 50 feet up. Landed right here, you see. And with me tonight, I have Kevin McFarland will be here as well. He's our urban forester, our tree protection professional. He can respond to questions too. But basically, this area here is fairly rotten and is no longer providing much structural support to the tree. So obviously a big branch and a concern from a safety standpoint. So because of that, Transportation and Engineering commissioned Kevin to do a assessment of the tree. And Kevin did a level 3 assessment of the tree. That's a very detailed assessment. He did an assessment himself, and he also hired a climbing arborist. You see her here. And also a separate company to do sonic tomography of the tree, which is basically a way of peering inside the tree, if you will, to get a pretty good idea of what the rot situation is in the interior of the main stem and the scaffold branches. What that found was there was significant rot in the main stem and scaffold branches of the tree, and that was concerning. And the assessment said basically that future failures of the type we saw last summer are likely to occur. This on the left here, this shows a representative cross section of the tree. This blue area, as I understand it, is an area that is rotten, and the good wood in this particular cross section is out on the periphery of the tree. So there just isn't a lot of, while the tree appears very healthy from outward appearances, structurally it's deficient. You can see on this slide here, this is a depiction of the area that the tomography showed is rotten and no longer providing very much structural support to the tree here. One option that the report considered is what's called a retrenchment pruning, which is basically kind of a tree topping on steroids, if you will. The idea here is that you would take out, and you can kind of see what would be the recommendation if that's the option that is chosen, is to basically take everything outside of this line, this direction, off of the tree. Pretty significant pruning. The idea here is simply to remove weight out of the tree and also to remove its wind load, some of its wind load in windstorms. It's a very, very radical pruning. It is an option for this tree. It would significantly, obviously, alter the appearance of the tree. It would also, some of these branches up here are about like the branches that came down. They're about 18 plus inches in diameter, so they're kind of the equivalent of many small trees on their own. So we start cutting the ends of those scaffolding branches in these areas. You've got all these new cuts in there that are then exposed to the weather. And according to the assessment, they introduce new avenues for potential rot in the tree. It would also require a new retrenchment pruning about every 5 years. So we'd have to budget for that. And it would be recommended that we do a new tomography every year to make sure that the rot hasn't progressed to a point that this isn't working any longer either. So we got a recommendation from from Kevin, our arborist, and this is the tree here. This is the historic hangar that the State Patrol is currently using. This is old Highway 99. So this is an area where tree professionals has multiple targets. This being a target, there's power lines that run through here, and also about 29,000 vehicle trips a day go underneath this tree. So there's many opportunities for there to be problems if this tree has another failure. As part of our risk assessment, we sent the tree assessment to WCIA, Washington City's Insurance Authority, to get their recommendation on how to deal with this from a risk standpoint. And after reviewing all the information we provided you tonight, they recommended that the tree be removed rather than retrenchment pruned. So next steps here, this is an interesting case in that the tree is on the historic register of places, historic places. So an ordinary removal of this type in our tree code is that we have hazard tree provisions in our code. And so, for example, if I, as a private homeowner, if I have a tree I believe is hazardous, I could call the city and say, I'm concerned this tree is going to come down and take out my house. We would tell the homeowner to hire our tree professional, which is Kevin, to do an assessment of the tree. If Kevin determined that the tree was hazardous, then we would issue a waiver, a tree permit removal waiver that would allow that tree to be taken down. That's the same process we use for our own trees, because this tree is in the right of way. The difference here being is that it is on the historic register. So community development can't issue a tree removal permit for this tree until it's delisted from the register. So on March 21st, the Historic Preservation Commission is going to hold a public hearing and consider delisting this tree and make a recommendation to the council on whether it be delisted or not. Obviously, they haven't had that meeting yet, so I can't tell you what recommendation they're going to make. But in any event, that recommendation will come to the city council for final approval on delisting the tree or not delisting the tree. So we have that scheduled for the 21st. Public notice has gone out for that already. On April 2nd, we would come back to the council after that 21st meeting with a consideration of the Historic Commission's recommendation. And then at that point, if it is delisted and directed by the council, we would then issue a tree removal permit. So basically, all that's to say, in the end, this is the final decision on this tree rests with the city council. Also, as part of this is both the tree board and the historic commission. If the tree is to be removed, They would consider how to commemorate the important history of the tree and look at any use of reclaimed wood, if there's wood that could be reclaimed. Should also mention too that recognizing the importance of this tree, we've already collected acorns from the tree, and Parks and Recreation staff and our arborists both are actually growing seedlings from the acorns. So we actually have a number of good starts for the progeny of this tree. And in any event, we intend to mitigate this tree, either it's lost now or it's lost in the future, with planting new trees in the new park at Trails End. So that's kind of the gist of it. This has been something we've kind of struggled with on a staff level for a little while. We all understand the importance of this tree, and we're sad to see it in the state that it's in. But we wanted to give you a factual assessment of the tree and make our recommendation to you so you can consider that. And I'm hoping that Kevin is on the call. I didn't actually check to see, but I hope he is. Kevin McFarland, as I mentioned, is our tree protection professional. And if you have more detailed questions about his assessment or that report, he can help answer those questions. And with that, I would be happy to stand for any questions you might have for either me or Kevin.
Right. I believe Kevin is here. I just don't see his camera on. So.
Okay.
Any questions? Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks. So Mike, what happens in the event that the Historic Commission decides to keep it on the Registry of Historic Places? Would that then mean that they've effectively decided it has to be retrenched and then addressed that way? And I'm also curious, I know that there's some trees, like if the main issue is that the core of it is so unstable that the branches can't survive on their own given weight. There's some trees on the Capitol campus that use metal supports and kind of, I don't know if truss is the right word, but there's sort of metal beams or supports or rods. Again, I don't know the proper terminology in terms of arborists, but there's definitely external supports that keep some of those branches up for similar purposes. Has that been analyzed as a possibility as well? Obviously, we couldn't do that over the road because it's a road. You can't have a truss in the middle of it, but there's some pieces that are in kind of that little grassy part in between the parking lot and the road that seems like maybe you could have a support beam there or something.
Yeah, I think that would be actually a good question for Kevin to see if that's a viable possibility. You're right, it couldn't happen over the road, and that's one of our main concerns is that tree hanging over the road with so much vehicle traffic on it. So I'd like to hand it over to Kevin for that. And before I do that, one thing I think I may have forgotten to mention, I mentioned we did receive a lot of comments on this from various concerned residents about the tree. There's been kind of a common thread through that we're doing this in order to be able to expand the roadway. There were some comments that this is being done because the Port of Olympia would like to expand the airport. Neither one of those are the case here. We don't have any plans. We have plans to expand that road at some point, but we don't have plans to have to take that tree down in order to do it. This is solely due to the health of the tree and our concerns about the liability and the safety of the public. So I just want to make that clear. And then I see Kevin's here. It's good to see you, Kevin. Thank you for attending.
Yeah, I was here. I just
I'm sure you were.
Technical problems there, so I am here.
Can you address the issue of supporting the tree through some sort of truss system?
I have seen those trees as you spoke of on the Capitol campus. The extent or the size that would be required and the location of where that support system or support systems beam or something that extends out over the highway, I just don't see how that would be able to be applied or constructed. I don't see how that would work. And yeah, I don't see how you could cantilever or bring the beam out over the highway, because if you look in the photo attached in the report and Mike had presented, you have two major codominant stems, one leaning out toward the state hangar, and then obviously one over the Highway 99. Again, I don't see how that could be installed to benefit or help support those two codominants, considering what is within in the decay column, in particular the one out over the Highway 99 section. So I didn't look into that. I didn't consider that, but in talking with you folks and looking at that question, I don't see how that would work. I really don't.
Okay.
The other part
Thanks.
of your question, Michael, that I didn't address very well was what if the Historic Commission does not delist the tree? And actually, whether they recommend delisting or not, that comes back to council for you to decide. So they could recommend one thing and council could recommend the opposite thing. But the practical effect is if at the end of the day, that tree isn't delisted, then community development would not issue a removal permit. And then we would look at retrenchment pruning options.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Kathy?
Thank you. I don't know, in 400 years old, the history in Tumwater, I would think we would start with the least invasive thing, not plan on someone getting hit on the highway or whatever, and do the retrenchment and see what happens. Or maybe the kind of thing that Michael's talking about could be custom done or whatever. I want to start from preservation and move out rather than start with, oh my, a car might be hit or it might fall on the, I didn't know that the state patrol was historic, but I honestly don't value that building more than I do the tree at this point. But that's where I'm coming from. And I just think that we say trees are rotting or take down that big tree or whatever. That happened in my neighborhood, and some other forester type people came and looked at the logs and the trunks and the stuff that was left and said, this tree could have been saved in some other ways, or certain branches or things could have been taken out of it or whatever. But it seems like we panic as soon as we hear the word core or that the main thing. And so I just want us to do everything possible to save this tree. And I don't know why we wouldn't start with, with the pruning. No, that's not the word, but start with cutting it back and seeing how she does.
Councilmember Gabi?
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, the rottenness for the core, how did that happen? Is it as a result of old age or disease or just whatever? Do you know what causes it?
What causes the decay? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
No. From what I can tell, it looked to me as a, what they call Ganoderma applanatum, and it's a wood decaying fungi that does affect Gary oaks, along with like big leaf maple trees and some other hardwoods. So that's what got established in some form or fashion and progressed through the tree.
Okay, so a follow-up question. If it's a fungi, what is the progression of that fungi stages?
As in, like, how much does it affect a tree in, like, say, a growing season or a year?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I do not know. I just looked at the extent of the decay as it as I found it in the tree, I did not project in terms of what I think the tree would experience in terms of progression of the decay. I know in talking with the arborist with Tree Solutions, and he brought up the recommendation if the tree were to be retained and some mitigation measures were taken, that the tree should probably be monitored and reassessed every year to, as you just brought up, to determine the progression of the decay, in particular in the lower portion of the trunk, going outward toward, all around the decay column that's in there. But overall, I do not know the progression on that or how much of the tree would be affected each growing season.
Councilmember Von Holtz.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo Council Member Kathy's question as to based on I mean, this is a beloved tree. Based on my inbox, just off the Facebook post that City of Tumwater put out today, I mean, there's a lot of attention, and so I have the same concerns. Like, it sounds like that it might be not the most nice looking result, but if there's a way that we could try to save this tree, why would that not be the course that we would take? Also, I'm wondering, is this the first time that this has been presented anywhere? This is the first that we've heard of it. Was this meeting and then the Facebook post earlier today?
Yeah, I can answer that one. I can answer the last part of that, council member. It is, this is the first time it's being presented to the council members. It has been discussed since last June, I think off and on with both the tree board and then at least informally with the Historic Preservation Commission members. I think it's not an easy thing. We're trying to look at all of the various pieces of information. The assessment that Kevin provided in your packet, which is in your packet, talks about both the likelihood or not of future failures, and then also the severity of impacts if there is a failure. And because of those two things, it's a high level risk. And so that's why we are initiating this first path, particularly given the concern raised by the insurance authority. I think if this tree were not located over top of a highway with lots of traffic and lots of opportunity for people to be seriously hurt, if a failure occurs, it might be a different conversation. But right now, that's kind of where that's why we are where we are in terms of the process that we're currently researching. And then, Kevin, if you wanted to maybe address why it is that you're recommending, why you were recommending the removal versus the more progression oriented retrenchment first, and then removal.
Thank you, Lisa, on that. I did take that in consideration, retrenchment, after even before the conversation I had, or the visit, to be honest with you, with Tyler with Tree Solutions when he was performing the tomography on the tree. I am familiar with it. I have seen it applied to trees here in the South Sound area. I have seen it work on smaller trees. And in particular, to get to the point of your question here, is that the retrenchment that I envisioned would still leave enough weight, if you will, on those scaffold branches that were retained, because you still have to keep in mind, you have to keep enough live canopy area for the tree to survive and not be overly stressed. it will be stressed if that's applied. But there's a fine line there, and the amount, and in fact, in the report, Tree Solutions, Tyler, he recommends approximately 15 feet of crown reduction. With that said, and the size of this tree, the tree still is going to have excessive weight on the scaffold branches that overhang the highway and the building next door, the hangar. I took that into consideration. I still felt that that was too much weight, that this tree would be more predisposed to losing a large section of maybe a codominant stem or a large scaffold branch. So that's why I still stuck with, after getting the information here and going over it in my head constantly. I was always thinking about it. And I still, I came up with the determination that I don't think that's going to be a reasonable way to mitigate this tree in terms of high risk. And so I stayed with that, and my recommendation, as you see in the report, reflects that.
Councilmember Kathy, and then Councilmember Althauser.
Thank you. Once again, it seems like we're making decisions. I mean, is this the first major branch that has fallen off this tree in 400 years?
No,
Is it major branch?
It has lost. There's other indications or signs on the tree where there has been large scaffold branches that have failed on this tree in the last 20 to 30 years, basically. Yeah.
And it was never that scary of a problem, evidently. We weren't talking about all of the, risk and so forth here. I'm of course, back to the same thing that I was saying, but another question I have, is there any kind of tree medicine for this? Is there some way we could be treating the tree, or because I'd like to see us do the start at the beginning with the retrenchment and the, pruning type of thing. And while we do that during that first year, is there any extra things we can do to, help the tree get healthier, get better soil, get food, get anything like that?
In terms of the infection caused by the Ganoderma, there's no treatment for that. But if you applied retrenchment and the tree obviously was to be retained, there can be some cultural measures that can be taken to try to improve the tree's health, if you will, in terms of regaining some of the lost canopy, live canopy, and supplementing the tree with some fertilizers of some sort. And as Tyler mentioned, there could be composted wood chips applied around the base of the tree. So there are some things that can be done. Typically what you would do for a tree in your yard anyway, you know what I mean? It's just to help it along. And in this case, if it were to be retrenched, then try to help improve its condition just by supplementing it with some measures.
Well, I'm sure that we would have a whole gaggle of volunteers from this community that would want to care for that tree. The other thing that bothers me, it's a question that we've talked about before. This has been being batted around, so to speak, or talked about or considered in tree board and in the different departments you're talking about. And this is the first time that we're hearing about how serious this is, and we're the ones to make the decision. I wish that we had been brought along a little sooner on this, and just had time to think about it or talk to community members, or not just be overwhelmed by it at this point. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks. Two quick questions. The first one I think I know the answer to, but we own the land the tree is on, right? It's in the right of way, like we own
Yeah.
that stretch of
Yes.
land. Okay.
Right away.
Okay. And so, Kevin, just to make sure I understood one of your earlier comments, like the report as it currently exists says that there is high risk of future failure. Even if we do retrenchment, the risk of future failure would not be amended by the retrenchment. Like it would still be considered high risk. Is that right?
Correct. That's yeah, that is my determination. Yes.
Okay. And I don't think we need an answer to this tonight. I don't know if we can have an answer to this tonight. This might more be a question for our legal counsel, but like if a tree branch does fall and we're aware of a risk that it is a high risk of failure and it falls into the roadway and hits a car and something terrible happens as a result of that, there's not only risk for the public, would that also then be legal exposure and legal risk to the city? Which that might be a Karen question, I'm not sure. Because if we know that there is a risk and then it fails, that seems different than a tree that, you know, we had a random gust of wind and unforeseeably a tree fell.
Yes, it is a good question for Karen. I think I have enough experience to say that I think you're right, council member, that if you have a tree assessment that says the tree is hazardous and something were to happen, you'd have of course, the tragedy of what happens to whoever the tree falls on and injures. But the second thing then is, and you do have increased liability exposure when we were aware that there's a problem with the tree and we didn't deal with that problem, and then there was an accident.
Okay.
That's what I think attorneys call that bad facts.
Yeah. So in terms of process and next steps, the tree board and the Historic Preservation Commission are meeting. They will make a recommendation whether it is to do retrenchment or remove the tree or none of the above. Well, no, to remove it from the historic places. And then it will come to a council meeting, an official council meeting where there will be a public comment period, I would assume, correct?
Yes, the only public hearing will be in front of the Historic Commission. That will be for the delisting of the tree from the register. That recommendation. will
The
go to
meeting
City Council.
tonight?
No,
No.
that will be, their hearing will be on the 21st of March.
Okay.
So when they do make a decision or recommendation, that will come back to the city council. And then you will have an opportunity to either, at that point, delist the tree or choose not to delist the tree. So that will really drive the decision on what happens in terms of the tree. If you delist the tree, by that point, it'll be clear to us which direction the city council wants to go, and we would issue a tree removal permit. If you choose not to delist the tree, then we would look at options for retrenchment, pruning, and probably in the next budget cycle, putting together an ongoing budget for that retrenchment, pruning, and the annual inspections to deal with the tree.
And one last question. This is prime like gopher habitat. Does this count as a disturbance? Removing the tree? Like are there any implications for needing some kind of habitat conservation utilization or amendment to work on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, there is no mitigation required as part of the HCP because the area is so heavily disturbed by the road and the parking lot. There's no presence of pocket gophers there. It's been heavily disturbed for many years.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kathy?
Yes, I have one, excuse me, question about the meeting of is it the Historic Commission? It's not the tree board, it's the Historic Commission. Is it, are they going to know about our comments and where we're coming from? Is there going to be an opportunity for us to have input and and have them know where council is before they make this decision? Or if they make this decision, then it comes back to us and we can undecide it?
That's the process. So the process is that the Historic Preservation Commission is holding a public hearing to consider delisting it because it's on the historic register. And then that recommendation comes to you for final decision at a regular council meeting.
So then that decision comes to the council for a final decision, is what you're saying?
Yes, they are making simply a recommendation, just like the planning commission, for example, makes a recommendation on an ordinance change or a comp plan amendment.
Okay, I still wonder, would they go into that meeting, the historic commission, without any, I don't know, any understanding of even this discussion that we've had, or where? I mean, are we doing all this in silos, or how is this?
We are not doing this in silos. We're following the procedures that are set up under the regulatory environment that we operate in, both state law and as well as city code. Part of the reason it's been so long since it's been a while since we've come to the council is because we've been very thorough in our research and trying to gather as much information as possible. So the Historic Preservation Commission will have all of the information that you currently have in your record in terms of the tree report and the recommendation. And that's what and because it's a public hearing, they will take public testimony because it's a public hearing. And then they'll close that public testimony and then make a recommendation, vote on a recommendation to forward to the city council for review. So it is not, the reason it's taken so long, council member, is because we are trying to be very, very thorough and look at this from every angle that we possibly can, because this is a very important tree for our community, and that's well understood. And it is one of those agonizing processes that, I'm sure Kevin is not, liking the fact that he's making the recommendation that he is, because everybody loves this tree. That is a given. And so I would just reassure you that we are doing everything we can to make sure that we are giving as much information as we can on the different pieces of the different perspectives, the different issues that need to be considered, and that we're doing that very deliberately and intentionally so that everybody has an opportunity to see, hear, and understand it. And I just want to reiterate one more time, this does not have anything to do with road maintenance. This does not have anything to do with an expansion of the airport. I confirmed with Brandon before the meeting, the plans that you see, the conceptual alignments and the right-of-way plans for the road improvements to Highway 99 still and continue to have an accommodation for this tree. So that we are simply here because of the health of the tree and the concern of liability if there is a failure.
Thank you. I mean, I understand that. I don't think anybody's trying to, sneak around or jump from silo to silo. I just used that word because, here we are having this discussion, expressing our opinions. And if I was going to be on the historic commission, I would want to know to this point what council thinks, since we're the ones making the final decision. But that's just me, and I'm not trying to go beyond, what our rules and regulations are. So, and that public hearing will be on the 21st of March, right?
Yes,
And that'll be in the council chambers.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. With that, thank you, Kevin, for all of your help and work on this and attending tonight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yes. All right, with that, we are going to move to the next item, which is ordinance number 2023-017, which is the floodplain overlay, and Erica Smith Erickson and Brad Mudrood. I'm sure it's just Erica, right? Oh, there's Brad. Okay. Will be presenting. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I am presenting tonight on our floodplain overlay amendments. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys so you can see my presentation. All right. So a little bit of background on the floodplain overlay amendments. Many communities participate in FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program. Continued enforcement of floodplain management through the City of Tumwater's municipal code allows FEMA to make federally backed insurance available to property owners within the city. In order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, the city is required to adopt and enforce flood hazard reduction regulations that meet the minimum federal and state requirements. In May of 2023, city staff completed a FEMA floodplain community assistance visit, or CAV, with Washington State Department of Ecology staff to review the city's participation in the floodplain regulations. It was determined that during the community assistance visit that there were some updates that were required to reflect floodplain regulations. On November 8th, FEMA notified the city of the final flood determinations for Thurston County and incorporated areas, including the city of Tumwater. The flood hazard determinations for the city are considered final. The flood insurance study and the flood insurance rate maps will become effective May 8th of 2024. Prior to the effective date, the city must amend its existing floodplain regulations to be more consistent with the model ordinance for floodplain management under the National Flood Insurance Program, the Endangered Species Act, and to maintain eligibility in the National Flood Insurance Program. Within the agenda packet, the staff report contains the amendments along with a summary. There are 15 total proposed amendments with 3 new code sections. What we're going to go over tonight is basically the new proposed amendments along with some updated language. Again, staff wanted to make sure that we wanted to know or do what was best for the city of Tumwater and also meeting that model ordinance. So our first code section that we amended was the definitions. The amendments help with the interpretation of floodplain regulations. 8 new definitions were added to the ordinance. I have the 8 definitions up on the screen there. Our next amendment was to section 1838-090. This section defines what areas are considered special flood hazard areas by referencing the flood insurance study and flood insurance rate maps. This is to be consistent with the recently updated flood insurance study and flood insurance rate maps. So we're updating our maps, the flood insurance study, and our code to reflect those changes. The next code section, Tumwater Municipal Code 1838-100, flood hazard data. This code section amendment is intended to clarify how special flood hazard areas are identified using base flood elevations and the flood insurance rate maps. This also clarified the process in instances where the base flood elevation and floodway data hasn't been provided. And then we have TMC 1838-130, floodplain development permit required. This code section amendment is intended to clarify when and where a floodplain development permit is required. We also updated the language to reflect the current flood insurance study and mapping. We also removed passive language that was previously in the code. Then we have TMC 1838-140 floodplain development permit application. This code section amendment was intended to add new permit application requirements such as elevation, certificate information requirements, elevations related to the mean sea level, and an engineering analysis requirement. This will help staff and applicants know what is required for a complete application. Then we have Tumwater Municipal Code 1838-180 records. This code section amendments intended to clarify what information is to be retained and what specific elevations are required for records. Records would also imply the permitting records. We also removed passive language, and we added a process for the floodplain administrator for when flood elevation information is not available. Then we have 1838-210 development and subdivisions. The proposed amendments clarify which types of land division proposals would be subject to the requirements of the floodplain, of this specific code section and requirements for projects over a certain size. We also, throughout these amendments, updated the acronyms to all be consistent. So we had the flood insurance study, which is FIS, and flood insurance rate maps, which would be FIRM. This one, 1838-184 flood protection standards. And this amendment is to clarify standards for construction within specific flood zones. It also added 4 new subsections or requirements. So again, this is when proposing development within or near floodways. These are standards to reduce damage or the potential for flooding. Then the next code section, we are talking about non-residential construction. We reformatted this whole section. We created more clear standards for non-residential development based on the model ordinance. And in specific zones, it goes into detail about new construction and substantial improvements, and about the base flood elevation and the levels of what the construction can be at, or the elevations, what the construction can be at. Then we added some requirements for manufactured homes in 1838-280. And also we stated that other anchoring requirements throughout Tumwater Municipal Code 1838 are applicable. It's not just this section of code. They also have to meet the other regulations for the floodplain overlay. This is so 1838-285 detached accessory structures. This is a new code section proposed through the model ordinance. It's specific to detached accessory structures and standards for developing in the floodway. It talks about uses, what the accessory structure could be used as, what it can store, and size, elevation, the materials used for the structure, the items stored in it, and how to anchor. Another new section, so we have Tumwater Municipal Code 1838-325, storage of materials and equipment. So this is a new section proposed for the storage of certain materials in the floodway. Storage of other material or equipment may be allowed if not subject to damage by floods, if it's firmly anchored and readily removable from the area within the time available after flood warning. It also says the storage of processing of materials that could be injurious or to human, animal, or plant life, or release due to the damage is prohibited in the special flood hazard areas. Then we updated TMC 1838-360 floodway standards. This is an amendment to clarify standards for projects within the floodway and state all construction shall comply with all flood hazard reduction provisions of this chapter of code. And then this is a new section. We proposed 1838-450 penalties for non-compliance. This section establishes penalties for non-compliance with Tumwater Municipal Code 1838 or our floodplain regulations. This code amendment added a penalty for not complying with this section of code. After further review of the federal and state standards, staff revised the language and removed, there was a jail penalty and a fine proposed through the model ordinance, but we determined compliance will be enforced under Tumwater Municipal Code Title I. So SEPA notice of intent, the 60-day notice of intent for ordinance 2023-17 was sent to Department of Commerce on December 14th, 2023. And the process was completed with no comments received. Our SEPA checklist for this ordinance was completed on December 13th, 2023, and a determination of non-significance was issued on December 29th, 2023. So this process is complete. Going into a little bit about the maps and the FEMA notification that went out for the maps. These were based on comments we received from the Planning Commission. So this is information I wanted to provide. FEMA was required to publish 2 notices in the newspaper of record for the communities affected. So I did reach out to FEMA and they did do the 2 public notices through the newspaper. There was a 90-day appeal period, but no appeals were received. Draft maps were published and available online. It was started through the Thurston County Lakes Flood Map Update. So this is a link here that will take you to the website. And then we also have a link that lets you compare the old FEMA flood maps to the new flood maps that will become effective May 8th, 2024. I would like to ask tonight that the City Council schedule this ordinance for March 19th, 2024 for a consideration.
Any questions? Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks, Mayor. So the recommendation is for consideration. So this would not be on consent, correct? Because we did receive a couple emails from folks who expressed a desire to offer some comment. So that would provide a little bit more of an opportunity where they could do public comment, and then we would give a similar sort of presentation to council publicly before voting. Is that right?
Yes, that would be the case.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Erica and Brad. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Have a good evening. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Just give me 1 second. There we go.
Great, thank you. All right. So now we have the Mayor City Administrator report, and we'll start out with City Administrator Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything currently, unless there are any questions.
Great. I do not have anything additional either. Just a reminder, this was one of our unusually scheduled council meetings due to the primary. So we will be back on normal schedule next week at our council meetings. So With that, we are adjourned and I appreciate everyone's time this evening and thank you.